All right, our second topic this week deals with Caitlin Clark, who was the former Iowa Hawkeye star, took Iowa Hawkeyes to far in the NCAA tournament the past 2 years, to the title game past 2 years, and lost both times, but has been just a popular phenomenon. The ratings for the games that she plays in have been through the roof, and just driving interest. She got drafted into the WNBA, number one pick. The teams that drafts her, ticket sales through the roof. Even the visiting games for the other teams, those ticket sales go through the roof. So it's been a phenomenon. Yet reports recently of her salary that she's going to be paid, where I think it's under $400,000 for the next 4 years total. That total, and there's been controversy over that, saying, "Oh, well, she's not getting paid what she deserves. She's getting underpaid." People compare to what a number one draft pick in the NBA makes, and so forth, or just the value that she's driving. And so there's been quite a lot of discussion on whether or not she's being treated fairly, whether or not this is sexist because of the way she's being treated. And so, Tunde, I just want to get your reaction on that. Just with the amount of money that she's in line to generate versus the contract that she signed with the WNBA, do you look at this as sexist, or do you look at other factors as driving this? Because the numbers are the numbers, and so, like, what do we attribute, this kind of discrepancy that we see to?
No, it's a good question. I mean, as you're lining it up, it makes me feel like, just like our first topic today, there's always complexity in these conversations. So let me answer directly on the sexism thing. Is there sexism in the world? Is there institutionalized sexism, just like racism? I think, yeah, that does exist. In this case, is her pay and her salary have to do with something sexist? I would say no. But I'll separate that from maybe the real corporate kind of salaries and what the WNBA has already established, and, the pecking order of how rookies get paid and all that, and the TV rights and all that stuff. I'll separate that from maybe, has she encountered any sexism in kind of the media and the culture and all that? I have seen some reports about how certain reporters have talked to her and certain things where I could say, yeah, they might not talk to a male athlete like that. So that's why I think, again, it's nuance, right?
So you're saying she is being treated sexist, but that her salary isn't necessarily a reflection.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm just being nuanced with it. That and that's why I want to be very clear, because I take all this stuff very serious. Just like we had a very serious conversation in the last part of our show about anti-Semitism. Sexism is real. I'm not going to be one of these guys that's just say, that everybody's crying. That doesn't exist. Of course, sexism does exist, and that's what I mean by systemic stuff. Just like we say that racism is still around, right? So it's but not everything is racist, right? Not everything that happens to a guy like me that's negative, I'm going to run and say it's just because somebody was racist. Sometimes it's my own behavior. Sometimes it just would have happened no matter who I was. And I think,
or the system that you plug into, could be unfair for other reasons beyond race.
Correct. And so that's where I'm saying that I think I'm drawing that line to say, can she be right now, today, being treated maybe unfairly from a sexism point, from the culture, from certain parts of the media and all that? Yes, that can totally be happening. And I've seen examples, like I mentioned. But I don't think that the salary part and all that is just sexism. Yeah. A lot of that is capitalism. It's just the way that the revenues and all that flow. And, we'll get into that.
I look at it in a similar sense, in that her salary is a reflection of her being treated unfairly. But that doesn't stem from, she's being treated unfairly in the way that professional athletes are being treated unfairly in that context. Like, professional athletes, like the idea that she got drafted is not fair, so to speak. Like, that, if I'm the best software engineer in the country, Apple can't draft me and then make me have to go work for Apple or some other company. The company that was the worst performing company in the last year doesn't get to draft my rights, and that's the only person I can play for. That's unfair. That's not because she's a woman. That's because professional athletes are subjected to certain unfair things. The fact that she has a slotted salary, she can't negotiate that salary, based on the collective bargaining between the players union and the league. That's unfair. That's completely unfair. And I mean, setting aside we're talking about her WNBA salary, but are we going to talk about her college salary as being unfair too? Or college salary of zero, where she gets a scholarship, and so that was unfair too, with the amount of revenue she generated for Iowa and for the NCAA. But again, that wasn't unfair because of because she was, a woman. That was unfair because of these structures and these systems are set up to be unfair. So I think it's actually a good thing that she's shining a light on the unfairness that might exist there, the anti-market, it's anti-capitalism in many respects in terms of how the athletes are treated. That she's shining a light on it, but I do hope that it doesn't get misattributed. That the reason she's experiencing these are the same things. It's on a different scale. It means a lot more to us when we see her coming in under $400,000 than it does seeing a NBA player, seeing LeBron James come in at $40 million, even though Caitlin Clark may be worth a lot more than what she's paid, but so is LeBron James. LeBron James might be worth $100 million a year, but he's capped at a certain amount. And so that won't get our passions fired up. It's like, oh, well, in our minds, this isn't necessarily the right way to think about it, but in our minds, it's like he gets enough anyway. So we're not going to cry about the fact that he doesn't get what he's worth either. So professional sports, though, welcome to professional sports. The whole system is set up with these collective bargaining agreements and so forth to, in the United States at least, to underpay the athletes and to treat them unfairly in many respects.
I'm just laughing because when you said about LeBron James makes enough money, I mean, this will be for the real people our age who follow NBA. I'm thinking of when Latrell Sprewell, like at the time, he got offered some $21 million, which was a big, it was like 15, 18 years ago when that kind of money wasn't thrown around. Yeah. And he was like, I need more money. I got to feed my kids. I was thinking like, oh, dude, that's not the way to respond.
That's not going to garner any sympathy for you. Yeah. He was in a contract dispute. And that wasn't, when your salary is public.
Hey, that's a good example. The reason why he's not a Hall of Famer isn't racism. He was actually a really good player. He was one of those guys that had a certain type of attitude that rubbed people the wrong way. So that was a good example, besides choking his coach. But that's a whole nother story. That's what I'm saying. We're old enough now that some young people don't know some of these stories. But no, I think you make some great points because in reading and preparing it, some good points were made that I think, again, and this goes back a little bit of just generationally as well, right? Like again, if you're a younger person, you don't appreciate all this. I mean, you and I aren't old enough to even appreciate some of this stuff, but we heard it. I mean, again, the NBA is 75, 76 years old. And for its first 35, 40 years, it didn't generate much at all. I mean, it wasn't until the early 80s with Magic and Bird and also kind of globalization, the technology of television, cable television, the ability for games to be seen more around the country. People didn't have to just go to stadiums and watch them. And so that all helped. But there was a time, like I said, in the 60s, early 70s that I hear of, that all professional sports, the athletes actually, most of them held summer jobs, not because they just wanted to work more, because they had to. They just didn't, the leagues didn't earn that much money back then. And these leagues were new. And if you look at the WNBA is a much newer league than the NBA. And so part of it is we are watching, and it's a good thing, the maturation of the WNBA and the ability, because of technology, like we're talking about, maybe it's here, social media as well, is able to blow through some of the existing order of media, and people get a real raw look at a really good basketball player named Caitlin Clark, and they like her. And so they're responding by buying tickets and watching her on TV and all that. And hopefully the goal, and that's why I think for people that feel like somehow Caitlin Clark's being treated unfairly from a salary perspective, maybe it makes them feel down about how women athletes are treated, and then maybe by extension, women in corporate America. We're seeing also a change, and this could be the beginning of where the collective bargaining agreement and the ability for female basketball players to negotiate higher revenue and higher salaries is coming. I mean, I'm going to assume that the next collective bargaining agreement is going to play out different than current.
Well, but there's an intermediate step which we're about to witness, and your point is well taken. Like from a pacing standpoint, the first 30 years of the WNBA, they're more successful than the first 30 years of the NBA. Now, it was a different time, and I don't think this is an issue of youth. I mean, this is an issue of just if you parachute in, if you haven't followed professional sports, or then more particularly the business of professional sports, then learning some of this stuff will seem like, oh, well, that's messed up, because like I said, in large part it is several structures in professional sports that a lot of Americans don't question are inherently unfair. Like if you go to European soccer and you start talking salary cap or you start talking draft, they'll laugh you out the room. It's like, well, hold up. I thought you guys were the free market people. Why would you do all these anti-market? The joke is always that professional sports owners, are the most socialist guys in the room. All of the rules for that the leagues are governed by are very, very socialist. They're very collective, and it's the teams operating against the players, so to speak. And they have antitrust exemptions with the government to back that up, so to speak, or to make sure that they can do that. But the intermediate step that Caitlin Clark is going to be a part of, she's akin to a Larry Bird or a Magic Johnson in this sense, and to some degree a Michael Jordan, but he was a little further along, or Dr. J. The growth in revenue happens before the growth in the spoils for the players. And so if Caitlin Clark comes in, and because she's there are more ticket sales, and this momentum continues, the next group of players that come in and so forth, the league continues to build on this, then the salaries will increase, because by and large, the way that these collective bargaining agreements work is that the players get a percentage of the revenue of the whether it be basketball related income, which will be a defined formula or whatever. And so as the revenue grows, then the players' pie will grow. Their cut may not stay the same, or may not grow, but they're growing. Their cut will be where at the next collective bargaining agreement they can say, okay, well, revenue's growing. We want a larger cut. Because right now, I do understand they get a smaller cut of the pie than what the men's leagues do. But again, that may be because it's a smaller pie necessarily and the bargaining power of it. But Caitlin Clark and the ability to grow the revenue has to happen first before the amount of money can start to compare with. If the NBA is making billions of dollars every year and the WNBA is making a fraction of that, it's understandable why the top stars in the WNBA would make less than the top stars in the NBA. So they got to grow the revenue first, and Caitlin Clark should be, the tip of the spear, the front end of that. And that's not to say that they haven't done that so far. Like, from what I understand, the revenue's grown a lot over the past 5 years already. So, but That's the process, though. It's you bring your star power, you grow the revenue. Then you negotiate better deals, whether it be with the media rights or then the CBA deals, and then you get more money, more spoils out of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the old Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, they'll come. And I think that's what you're saying, is that the talent pool in the WNBA has gotten a lot better in recent years, and Caitlin Clark is someone who will continue to improve that. So honestly,
let me jump in, because actually I don't think that's the case. I do think talent pool has gotten better, but actually what's needed isn't better. What's been shown is it's not necessarily is the gameplay better. It's stars. It's people who bring eyeballs. It's not necessarily like the talent. Excuse me. The players were maybe just as good 3 years ago, but if they didn't have the same star power, and this is movies, you could be the best method actor in the world, but if you don't have the star power, your movie may not draw like Tom Cruise. And so what she's bringing. She's a great player, but she's also bringing star power. And so that's what's going to help really push. And so that's where I would push back on you. Just that, yes, the players are better, but what's really needed are these magnetic personalities, or these storylines, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, like these storylines that bring more people in. And Caitlin Clark, and some of the controversy she's been in has been a storyline that brought more people in, and her game has brought more people in, and her personality has brought more people in. So that's the kind of stuff you need.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And when you think about it, to your point about the WNBA, I mean, the idea you use of pacing is very good, because I'm thinking about it. We're in 2024 now, the year. It's been exactly 40 years since the first Air Jordans were released. Think about that. 10 years later, by 93, I think, so let's call it 9 years later, Michael Jordan was the highest paid player in the league that year, and I think his salary was $4 million. And last year in 2023, I believe Stephen Curry was the highest paid player. His salary was $48 million. So you're right. When you're talking about the pacing, the NBA just had a lot more time and a lot more longevity with things like sports marketing, the shoes, the video games, all that stuff. And to your point, the collective bargaining nature of that. And so the WNBA is now going to start having that. And I think it's evident with things like the fact that Caitlin Clark signed, I believe it's a $28 million contract with Nike, which is unprecedented for a female basketball player. And it's great. And think about this. Nike's, just like they do with other people, right? They're taking a risk because she hasn't played one WNBA game yet. We don't know what kind of player is. And again, going back to the men's side, how many times have you and I, specifically in basketball, since we were in high school, seen players that were really awesome in college that didn't play out in the NBA the same way? And, that could happen with Caitlin Clark. I hope it doesn't. But I'm just saying that the idea that Nike took this type of gamble and given her this kind of contract is another sign to me that her salary isn't about sexism. Let me just put it that way.
Because that salary is not subject to collective bargaining.
Correct.
Draft. Yeah. She didn't get drafted by Nike. She could negotiate with any shoe company and all shoe companies and try to get the best deal and so forth. And that's what I mean as far as how the actual WNBA piece of it is unfair. But again, don't misattribute the unfairness. The unfairness isn't because she's a woman. The unfairness is because those systems are set up to rigged against the professional athletes. And that's not something I think is a good thing. But that's kind of, we accept that for whatever reason in the United States. We accept that, like just with we take when there's disputes between players and owners, we take the owner's side. It's really bizarre, to me, to see that like just
we are susceptible to let billionaires manipulate us in the United States. I don't know why. It's funny.
I want to make one point because we got to get out of here. But I'm glad you brought up the Nike thing because I've seen also some of the pushback. And you didn't do this, but do people say, oh, well, it's okay that her WNBA salary is low because she has the opportunity to, she has State Farm and Nike and all these other to make up for endorsements. And I think that point is objectively wrong. That should be additive. Like the fact that she makes less than the WNBA isn't made fair because she makes more in these other contexts from, she's making that money because those companies, independent of anything else, think that her star power drives their business. And so it's not something that but again, the WNBA game, that process happens on a different timeline. Again, she didn't State Farm didn't draft her. And so Allstate couldn't sign her. Like State Farm and Allstate had to compete. But I'm not saying, there's not reporting that Allstate tried to, but just for purposes of illustration, had to compete. And whoever offered the best money or the best opportunity got the deal, with her. So the fact that she makes marketing money doesn't take away from the fact that what she makes because the WNBA money, it's not like that the money that she's supposed to get a fair cut of the WNBA money as well. And so she doesn't get that yet, but that pot needs to grow and then they need to get a better cut out of it. That she's part of that process is the overall point. But it shouldn't be that, WNBA shouldn't have to pay her as much because these other companies will do it as well. Because the WNBA is making money in the the Indiana Fever, the team she's going to play for, they're making money. And so that money should be, and that's just, the way with she's part of the labor. And so that money should be shared with, in terms of the people that are generating that revenue, so to speak. So I just wanted to make that point as far as it is a throw off to say, because she has the market, the $20 million Nike contract, the WNBA stuff doesn't matter. That stuff still matters. It's different pots. It's different revenue streams. But the Nike one and the other endorsements, just the path to growth for those is straighter because it doesn't involve the revenues of the whole league, collective bargaining, all this other stuff.
Yeah, and I just want to finish on just some of the stats. Just to compare. The NBA's revenue last year was around $10.5 billion. And that's up. I was looking back. There was some good charts in the year 2000. The NBA was at $2 billion in revenue. And so it was probably around 2010, 2011, it was around $5-6 billion. The WNBA, they estimate, made a close to $200 million last year in 23. The year before, it made $100 million in revenue. So meaning they doubled in 1 year, where it took the NBA almost a decade to double to where it is now. So to your point about the pace of things and this exponential growth, the WNBA appears to be on a good trajectory. And I want to highlight
to grow in order for her salary to grow.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'm going because I want to highlight Shaquille O'Neal's comments that I saw recently, and I think he was right. He made a great point. He said, first of all, I can't name you any of the male college basketball players from this Final Four and all that. And look, I can't either, but that's because I wasn't paying too much attention to it. I also wasn't paying too much attention. Yeah, that's where I'm getting at. That I wasn't paying attention to the girls either, but I can name 3 or 4 female players from this year's NCAA female tournament. So that Shaq's point is valid. That to your point of it already shows that the star power, the media is starting to pay attention more than they did in the past. The second is, if you look at the amount of people that watched the finals in the NBA in 2022 on television was 12.4 million. as opposed to 412,000 viewers for the WNBA finals in the same year of 2022. I'm going to assume those numbers will be higher going forward. But what Shaq's case was for everyone that's got an issue with this, they really need to go and support the WNBA. And that doesn't mean just turning on the TV once in a while and all that. That means you got to go spend money on the jerseys. You got to go buy the video games. You got to go to the actual games if you're within that market, not just watch on TV, but pay for tickets. Because that's how the NBA got to where it is today, is the merchandise, it's the shoes, it's the this, the that. So when Nike does create the Caitlin Clark shoe, hopefully a lot of people buy it because it'll give Nike and other companies confidence to go find the next female basketball player and do an endorsement contract. So this goes back to like everything else in our society, like our democracy and all that. If we want to see a change, we as the people within this society have to do something about it. And in this case, we need to support those of us that want to see the WNBA have more revenue and the players make more money. We actually got to go spend money now in that space. And I think that's key.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from if you want to create change in a market type system, then you vote with your pocketbook, and so that's kind of that point. Is that like yes, you choose where to spend your money. If you don't like the way certain things happen, you withhold your money. If you want to encourage certain things or to support certain things, you would direct your money there. So, but no, I think that's a good point, and that's the ongoing challenge, so to speak. And it'll be on the labor union and so forth to also get a better share of what they're doing. But growing the revenue has to happen for the salaries to match up. So yeah, but I think we can wrap from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk to you next time.